Good evening, I'm Joel Labi in Hong Kong and welcome to ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show, UK terror threat up to highest level of critical, meaning more attacks may be imminent. In a landmark ruling and the first in Asia, Taiwan court says yes to same-sex marriage. And Hong Kong issues first black rainstorm warning of the year as torrential rain lashes the city all morning. And we start with the latest on the Manchester Arena bombing that killed at least 22 people, including children. Authorities have identified the suicide bombing suspect as British citizen Salman Abedi. This as the country upped its security threat level to critical from severe. The Manchester Arena remains cordoned off by police. The bombing, claimed by Islamic State, wounded 59 people, with some still battling life-threatening injuries. In a televised address, Prime Minister Theresa May said the threat level was raised to make extra resources and support available to police, as a further attack may be imminent. Armed forces are now deployed to boost security at key sites, and military personnel may be deployed at public events, such as concerts and sporting events.
I ask everybody to be vigilant and to cooperate with and support the police as they go about their important work. The spirit of Manchester and the spirit of Britain is far mightier than the sick plots of depraved terrorists. That is why the terrorists will never win.
Meantime, emotional scenes in Manchester as the city rallied together. Let's hear from our reporter Katie Gregory, who is there covering the story on the ground.
We are seeing just this huge outpouring of grief and also support on the streets of Manchester. Now, that flower memorial is expected to get bigger as the day wears on here, as people come into the centre of the city and go to work. They will drop off flowers. They'll continue to leave messages of condolence for those who've lost their lives in this horrific attack, but also those many injured still in hospital recovering from those injuries. Now, I suppose you could say in the last sort of 24 hours, couple of days here in Manchester, we really have seen the best and the worst of mankind, the worst being that horrific attack, but the best being just this resilience, incredible resilience shown by the public here in Manchester. From the very moment news broke of this attack, people were opening their doors to strangers. We were at hospitals yesterday where people were rushing, Good Samaritans rushing to give blood just to help any injured who needed it. And we also met a coffee shop owner who was in the centre of the city. He could have easily stayed shut like a lot of shops did yesterday, but despite that, he opened. He had no staff working for him. They were too scared to come into work, but he stayed open to offer free coffee, free food for anyone who needed it, anyone who was impacted, and even those who weren't. So we are truly seeing this show of defiance here in Manchester, like we saw displayed at that vigil last night. People holding up signs saying, "I love Manchester," showing this force of unity. But there is also this sense of shock still that has happened here, and also fear as people sort of get on with their lives and get back to their normal routines.
Now, Katie Gregory there in Manchester. Now, over in the Philippines, deadly clashes between Islamist militants and government troops in Marawi have forced President Rodrigo Duterte to declare martial law throughout the island of Mindanao. As Ryan Brooks reports, the leader had to cut short a trip in Russia to handle the crisis.
The southern Filipino island of Mindanao waking up to its first morning of martial law Wednesday after deadly clashes between Islamic militants and soldiers in the city of Marawi the day before. 2 soldiers and a policeman were killed and 12 more wounded in an attack by Maute, a militant group that has pledged allegiance to Islamic State. The group took over buildings and torched a school, church, and jail, leading President Rodrigo Duterte to announce 60 days of martial law over all of Mindanao, a region the size of South Korea and home to more than 20 million people. Duterte cut short a trip to Russia following the attack, calling it an ISIS-orchestrated rebellion, but not before asking for Moscow's help with weapons to fight the insurgents.
I have the money and pay right away, because the arms that we ordered from America was cancelled, and I'm having a problem now with the ISIS. There's a rebellion.
Duterte has repeatedly warned that Mindanao is at risk of contamination by Islamic State fighters driven out of Iraq and Syria. Although a military spokesman tried to qualify his comments later, saying there is no ISIS presence in the Philippines, only militants posing as the infamous group.
On to other news now, and in a major victory for gay rights advocates, Taiwan's top court passed a ruling today stating that same-sex couples have the right to legally marry. This is the first such ruling in Asia. In handing down the decision, the court said current laws that restrict marriage to a man and woman violate the constitutional rights of same-sex couples. It gave a period of 2 years for the relevant laws to be amended. The observatory issued this year's first black rainstorm warning this morning as torrential rain lashed the city, forcing schools to cancel afternoon classes. The black rainstorm warning was raised shortly before noon and areas like Shaokei-wan were flooded. Traffic chaos got worse over the morning rush hour and wreaked havoc for children and their parents on the way to school. But the warning was downgraded to an amber alert after an hour. The observatory said the wet weather comes as a trough of low pressure affects the Guangdong coast. A scare for passengers on board a China Eastern Airlines plane amid that downpour as it slid off the runway after landing in Hong Kong. Luckily, though, it managed to stop on the lawn next to the tarmac and none of the 141 people on board were injured. The flight from Nanjing arrived just before 11 this morning after the observatory had issued a red rainstorm warning. More than 100 flights were delayed as the north runway was closed for almost 2 hours following that accident. The Development Bureau said nothing abnormal was found after conducting initial safety tests on the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau bridge. Now, this comes after the ICAC arrested 21 people over falsified concrete test results for the multi-billion-dollar overpass. Permanent Secretary for Development Hong Ching-kyung says the Highways Department is closely following the safety performance of the link. He stressed the government puts safety and quality as its first priority. The government will hold a press conference tomorrow to further explain this matter. Now, the government is taking another shot at reforming the city's medical watchdog. It plans to submit an amendment bill to LegCo on June 7. The bill failed to pass nearly a year ago in the face of fierce opposition from the medical profession. The government proposed to appoint 4 additional lay members to the member council, including 3 representatives from patients' rights groups and 1 rep from the Consumer Council. Meanwhile, the Academy of Medicine will elect 2 members to join the watchdog. These 6 members wouldn't need to be appointed by the chief executive. Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. A late rally has helped Hong Kong stocks to a 4th day in positive territory. The Hang Seng Index ending up 0.1% to 25,428, which is a fresh 22-month high. The market shrugging off Moody's decision to cut China's credit rating. Cathay Pacific, the best performing stock of the day, adding 6%, while investor darling Tencent stalled from its dizzying heights, losing about 0.5%. Now, as mentioned, this credit downgrade from Moody's rattled markets in China in early trade. It's the first time we've seen a cut like this in a quarter of a century. Graham Mackay explains.
A concrete signal of the growing concern over China's soaring debt. Moody's, one of the world's top 3 credit ratings agencies, downgrading the country's credit score on Wednesday over fears that its financial strength will erode in the coming years. It's the first time Moody's has cut its rating on Chinese debt in more than a quarter of a century. Reuters Shanghai Bureau Chief John Ruich explains what's behind the move.
The issue at the core here is the debt problem in China, in the economy, in the financial system. Chinese companies, Chinese people, the Chinese government have racked up debt at a rate that's alarmed economists since the global financial crisis. They've been piling on debt. And what Moody's is concerned about is how this debt creates tensions in the financial system.
China's rating is now down a notch from A1 to AA3, still comfortably within the range for an investment-grade rating, but yet another sign the boom times are winding down. That message reinforced by Moody's, which also sees China's economic growth falling to around 5% in the coming years, continuing a steady downward spiral compared to the breakneck pace of years gone by.
There's never a great time to have your credit rating downgraded. For China, though, it's a particularly tough time now because not only do they have this big mountain of debt that they're trying to work through, but economic growth is at close to a 25-year low. What they're trying to do, one of their initiatives is to try to bring in investment from outside. They're also trying to attract foreign investment in the bond market. This downgrade could hurt both of those efforts.
But it's not all doom and gloom. Moody's has also bumped up its outlook on China's credit rating from negative to stable, a bright spot that could help pull investors back in as debt piles and GDP continue to head in opposite directions.
France's election outcome seems to be spurring on business confidence in Germany. Business morale brightened more than expected in May to hit its highest level since 1991. It's a further sign company executives are upbeat about growth in Europe's largest economy, especially given France is the country's second biggest trading partner and new President Emmanuel Macron is pro-Europe. The US government is suing auto giant Fiat Chrysler for using software to try to cheat emissions controls. More than 104,000 diesel vehicles sold since